Hi, I'm here to talk with you about wide open page design or inside wide open structure. The concept here is we've looked at individual small units just with text and then with images and then maybe more complex with multiple images but still a single story design. Then we put a couple, 2, 3 stories together on a page and separated them with column rules, and we did some boxing also. But we weren't thinking about the entire page. When we think about a page complete, it's more than just that individual story units work on their own. They all have to work together as the page. There's always compromises, and you have to deal with the content that you have. Sometimes you can get some flexibility by maybe jumping a story or cutting a story, with those are options. But overall, we're not thinking at this point so much about what the stories are, and in fact, these are obviously anonymous stories, just generic with what we call lorem ipsum, just blank filler text, and same thing with grayed out images. But I think this is the best way to think about page design. So I really strongly encourage, as you begin this, to read in the textbook, pages 84 to 87, 96 to 97, 103, about recommendations for page structure. It's really important information. Perhaps you'll notice that I'm actually showing you some pages from a kind of a presentation. It's a PDF that is here available for you to look at. By the way, if you're looking at this on a screen that's a little small, you could perhaps print that PDF and look through the pages. So my ideas about wide open inside pages are a bit different from the ones you read in your textbook. Probably because I'm used to the more modern, narrower pages, and also used to column rules. These are more generic. They kind of work with column rules or boxes, but I'm used to using column rules. So some things, perhaps like head bumps, aren't quite as big a problem, but we'll talk about them briefly. Now, in the case of the examples I suggest you, and positive examples, as this one is here, I know that you're not going to be able to just take them and use them exactly, because you never know what content you have. That's the thing. Every page is different. Every page has unique content in one way or another. However, there's still a lot of things you can carry from these examples and use and reuse. For instance, we often talk about how the page is split up. The split of the page, by which I mean how many columns on one side and how many columns on another in the major units of the page. This would be called, in general, a 4-2 split. 4-2 splits are very common. 3-3 splits at the bottom of the page are not that unusual also. So that's something we're looking at, is the number of columns. We'll talk about 2-4 splits, 4-2 splits. We'll talk about those things perhaps followed by a 6-column modular unit, or you might even be able to have a 1-4-1 split. So we'll talk about those things, and thinking about the page in that way will give you some starting structure to keep in your mind. I still think that dummying can be very useful when you're starting out with a full page. I know that I didn't convince very many of you to do this, but if you would like some dummies, I can leave them for you. I can send you PDFs of dummies that you can print out, or perhaps you can just make your own little sketch-like dummy to sketch out where things will be, just on a regular sheet of paper. That's actually, a lot of designers do that instead of actually having true dummies. I'm going to mention overall, it's just an overall rule, let your images drive your pages. And remember, make decisions. Decide which is the big head, the dominant lead story, which is the big photo, the dominant photo. Make sure that the biggest photo is at least twice as big as the next biggest photo. So make decisions and stick with them. Then I'm going to show you some negative examples: over-symmetrical, static pages, bad page splits, head bumps. Head bumps are not something we worry too much about with our column rule newspapers, but still is something to think about. A1, feature pages, picture pages, pages with ads are different. We'll modify and add to this narrative, but some of these ideas still will carry on through. Some of these ideas will carry on. Okay, so let's take a look at some of these pages. And this first one Very common structure. Most of our photos are usually horizontal, and photos that are vertical tend to be smaller because they're often people's heads. So having a 4-column or a 5-column horizontal photo is quite common on inside pages. Once you put a 4-column photo on there, then all of a sudden you are pretty well stuck with just a few possible structures. And if you have somewhat equalized size length stories, then you might very well end up with something like this. And what else are we thinking about here? Well, we're thinking about the balance of art. Notice that, yes, we have dominant art, but we have some art on the other side of the page. In fact, this would probably be better if I had this story unit on the other side of the page, or perhaps ran this in the 3rd and 4th column, because although our pages can't be weighed so they balance perfectly, and when they are, actually, maybe it's not a good thing, but in general, we try to have a balance of art. Now that's kind of made up for by the fact that we have pull quotes here. Now none of these stories show subheads, and I didn't actually include subheads in these mock-up pages. But you would think that these stories are long enough that perhaps all of them might have subheads too. That would keep it from getting gray. We want to make sure we don't sacrifice any part of the page to just being gray. If we have an area that's somewhat gray, we try to do a pull quote. We make sure to have subheads to lighten things up a little bit. And also that we might move things around so there's better balance of art. So it's okay here, but not great. Okay, here is another very common kind of a split. Starting the page off with a 6-column lead. So 6-column leads, the great advantage to a 6-column lead is that it breaks up any bad page splits. What are bad page splits? Well, more about those later, but you'll see what I mean. It's the idea of a page split in such a way that both sides of the page feel like they peel away. A page is truly split from the top to the bottom. Once we put a 6-column on there, we have a lot of flexibility about what to do with the rest of the page. And in this case, we have pretty well balanced art, although the bottom of the page is kind of grayed out. Definitely could use a pull quote there, and of course subheads too. But this idea of a smaller piece of art in a 6-column story at the top, it could have been a horizontal, and then maybe a big centerpiece, which maybe isn't the lead story, doesn't have the biggest head, but has a couple of photos on it, and then maybe we would call these rails or partial rails. In general, a 1-column story that goes from the top all the way down to the bottom is called a rail. Okay, I really like this kind of structure when you have a 6-column, and when you have to, and using this kind of structure when you have a large vertical. Large verticals are tough. The problem is they get so big, take up so much of the page. You almost need a large vertical unit to put them in. How are you going to get that? Well, it could be at the top of the page, and we'll see how that can be switched around. But in general, it's a large 4-column unit, and hopefully a long enough story to go all the way around it. Again, a bit gray on the page over here, so that would be a problem. Needs a pull quote over there, perhaps. Here's how we can do that large vertical, and now still not have a page split, because we put a 6-column down below. And now this is the lead story, and it has the biggest art too. Remember, those things don't have to go together. The lead story doesn't have to have the biggest art. The biggest art is the best art. The lead story is the most important story. Okay, and now we continue into the idea of a 2-4 split with a 6-column on the bottom. Again, breaks up that possible page split, and there's some nice balance of art here, I think. A little bit of gray on this area of the page, probably needs a pull quote right there. Do notice in all these examples, see how I'm using column rules. Some of you have problems with column rules, but notice that the column rules have equal gutter on either side. The same gutter is right there. You use the column rules from the library, and you use the spacer box that's on there. And then column rules go here, equal space up and down, top and bottom of the horizontal ones also, equal space here. Column rules go, they never touch, they respect the same alignment as the stories, and at the top also. Now we're getting into problems. This is a bad page split. This is what I mean by bad page split. The feeling is that this page is split from top to bottom, right? And it feels like the sides could just kind of peel away from each other. A very bad page split. A 3-3 down the entire page is a poorly made page. Even if there's balance of art, even if there's still a big head, and so on, it's still a poorly made page. This would be a page that has 2 page splits, and I guess you would call it a problem page, but we don't seem to be bothered as much by sometimes having a rail that goes all the way top to bottom. A 3-3 split is terrible. This split is not that bad. That's not the problem with the page. The problem with the page, I would say, is it is too static. It is almost too balanced. This page, if you did cut it down the middle, would be completely symmetrical from left side to right side. We've got to break up the page. A completely static page, we talk about it being kind of stationary and stale. How would we do that? Just taking this photo and moving it over to these 2 columns here would give a slight bit of imbalance, which actually gives some energy. How we make up for that? By putting a pull quote in here. Maybe we can get a half-column mug in this story also. We also would not want to have exactly the same number of decks. We're going to change the heads on either side of those. So watch out for pages that are too static, overall static. Now this talks about the idea of avoiding page bumps, head bumps. Avoiding head bumps. What's a head bump? A head bump is when 2 stories sit side by side having almost the same headline structures. And the feeling is that even with a column rule in between them, and we use column rules, so there'd be a rule there, could the reader read right from one right through to the other? Well, not consciously they wouldn't, but subconsciously there would be the feeling that this headline kind of extends right through and right through. We call that a bad bump, a head bump. We should be able to say, honestly, with column rules that there is no such thing as head bumps, but there kind of is. So I would just avoid this situation where the heads are exactly the same size, same font, and then almost running into one another. How would we take care of that situation? I think with column rules, we're fine to just have one head style and then change the style. And also, I would write this head a touch short, perhaps, to take care of that feeling too. That's one way to deal with it. Another way would be what we call a raw wrap. So having a photo in between the 2 headlines is a possibility. Now this is not that great a design, and it's somewhat risky, but still it's all one unit, and we still have contact between the headline and the top of the story, so it's really not that bad. And we have a column roll on top. There's absolutely nobody could say there's any head bump problem in this situation. Okay, now we're talking about some stuff from the textbook, and we think about things that are wrong with these pages, and what's wrong with these. I want you to look these over and think about it for a minute. So there's several things wrong with each of these pages. Like what? Well, you'll see in A, of course, there's a huge amount of gray area. Not very much art on the page at all. This whole chunk of the page is just sacrificed to it. Sacrificed to gray. All right? Problem here is, of course, we've got this strange stick sitting out here with this headline probably goes with. I don't know. What's the relationship between these units here, right? I just don't know. We also have a little tiny head on the top and a big one down below. And our photo sizes are really too close. Too close. You could also say this part of the page is gray. Problem over here is that we definitely have a page split all the way down, page split, and we have all the art on the left side of the page, right? Also, we have potentially a head bump here too. So that's the problem with those designs. And then these 4 layouts below all use the same story elements. Which of the 4 is the best and why? Well, you can read about this in your textbook, and I probably should, because I think there's pluses and minuses to all of them, really. Honestly, I would say the one that I think is the best, I would say, especially using column rules, so we don't have to worry about head bumps, and it's obvious what things go with what. With the column rules, I kind of like A, although I don't think your textbook would say that's the best. I think your textbook would probably say that D is the best. D has a nice variety in art. There is a bit of we're preventing a head bump here with this. We're assuming this is all one unit. Column rules would show us this. And we've got some balance in the art too. That's D. B is not bad. I'm just not that crazy about this kind of separation of the art, but it's really not bad. None of these are pages that are like wrong. Okay, I think C has balance, but we've got some head size problems there. A small head on the top, And I just like the 1-4-1 split when you've got a 6 column down below, and the column rule would slap across there and keep us from having that problem. I would like this page a little better if this 6 column head went all the way across, I suppose. And this is a nice big centerpiece here. There is some gray here. I would imagine a pull quote in there. Lots of gray in there. I think that's the problem with this one. Quite a bit of gray here. This one has the gray broken up a little bit better. So yeah, good and bad all the way around. That's the end of that presentation. So look through that, look through the pages yourself, think about the relationship of the entire page as one big unit. Realize this is a puzzle, making all these things work out together.